You must love podcasts if you're listening to this. Do you want to start your own one or you already have one? Then follow Smarter Podcasting to get expert advice from me, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. Since 2019, we've worked with over 40 podcasters, produced over 700 episodes, and helped many podcasts get to the top of the Apple Podcast charts. And right now, I'm offering you a professional edit for just $27. Click the link in the show notes. You want to introduce, obviously, who you are, but why are you the person to guide the listener to the goal? Explain to people, why should you listen to me and why am I doing this podcast?
Everyone has their unique story and their unique way of doing their podcast. And that's why you build fans and followers that way, because they're listening to you. And I don't know, the energy as well. You definitely have to bring the energy.
Always have just one call to action, and I would make that call to action support your business goals.
I've written a lot of notes. I love having feedback to improve.
Welcome to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Niall Mackay. I started my first podcast in 2019 just as a hobby, and it's now in the top 10% of podcasts worldwide and is on track to reach 100,000 downloads this year. I started making my own podcast in 2019, and then I transitioned into making podcasts for people around the world. I've helped work on over 40 podcasts, helped podcasts reach the top of the Apple Podcast charts and get millions of downloads. In this episode, I'm going to be doing one of my podcast audits where I've listened to a podcast, I've written down my notes, and I'm going to give feedback to the very brave host of that podcast. Now, this podcast is called the Inspired by Success podcast. My guest today started the entrepreneurial journey from a high school dropout to a teen mum and is now the founder of Game Guys. She's overcome homelessness, addiction, and incarceration to become a successful business owner and start her own show, the Inspired by Success podcast, which focuses on resilience and features entrepreneurs and thought leaders. My guest today, all the way from Sydney, Australia, is Linda Vo. Thank you very much for joining me today, Linda.
Thank you for having me on, Neil.
You are very, very welcome. I'm excited. You look scared there. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm usually the one that's interviewing people, not being interviewed. So let's do it anyway.
It's a weird sensation when you flip it around, right? So what inspired you to start a podcast called Inspired by Success?
I should have done it a while ago, actually. I've always wanted to create content and share my journey, my entrepreneurial journey, and share the failures in business. And so, I don't know, what made me start? Oh, yeah, listening to my favorite podcasters. You know, I got inspired by them. I have my favorites like Ed Milet, Layla Hamosi, Ryan Pineda, Lewis Howes. So I love them. And then that's why I decided to create my own podcast, because I was inspired by theirs. And so I use mine as a mesh to learn, and a mesh of all them. But I love it because I get to learn from all these entrepreneurs and hear their stories and just share it with the world. So I wish I did it years and years ago, but never too late to start.
No, never at all. And how long have you been publishing it for?
I believe under a year. So yeah, about 9 months. Actually, I have to go back to it, but yeah, less than a year.
Relatively new.
Mm.
Well, we start every one of these audits. I have a series of questions for you. So the first question is, what equipment do you record with?
I just started with the basics equipment because I knew nothing and I had to just research it on my own. So I just use a Yeti Nano mic, and I have lightings because, you know, you got to always try to improve in the podcast game. So lighting is a must, and I use tools such as Buzzsprout, and to film I use Riverside.
Nice. I recently spoke at the Podfest conference in the Philippines, and I got to meet Chris Mitsofs, who was promoting a book that he'd written, and I absolutely love the title and I love the theme. It's called Start Ugly, and then just try and improve as you go. And I 110% live by that. I started with a Blue Yeti microphone as well, actually a Blue Yeti Ice microphone, which broke within about 6 months. So I don't recommend that brand or that microphone anyway. Started in the front room, no lighting, no equipment, no video, and now, I just try and make my episodes 1% better every time and try and improve it slightly to the point now that we have a studio here in Saigon. That's not where I am right now. I'm actually recording from home, but the equipment has just improved all the time. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see I have a green screen behind me, which to me is the coolest thing ever. I think that's so awesome. And so when you'll be watching this on YouTube, you'll see some cool image of podcasting behind me, probably using a Shure microphone, and hopefully the quality is really good. So yeah, I'm 100% on board with just getting started with the equipment that you have and continually improving. So you use Riverside, you got the Blue Yeti microphone, you've got lighting, which is awesome. How do you do your editing? What program do you use for editing, and how do you do it?
So luckily I have a team, and because I have no time for editing, but they just use CapCut, simple as that. And one of them uses Adobe Premiere Pro as well. So CapCut is the easiest, and it's a free tool. And Riverside, great tool too, because I get all my shorts, and it uses AI, and it gets all the shorts from the long form, and from there they still have to edit it. And yeah, it's pretty basic, not that hard. And then they just add B-roll and music. So very simple. This day and age, anyone could do it. So there's no excuses.
Nice. And then what is your podcast niche?
Okay, so the thing is, the podcast is it's a bit different because it's very broad and general. I mean, it's the topics that I like to learn about, which is business, finance, mindset, even spirituality, and even health as well. So I thought recently I watched a video of Alex Hormozi, and he talked about niching down. And the main thing was mainly to do with business. So I'm starting to focus more on business. And I love hearing stories how entrepreneurs built their empires, or the failures they had to go through in order to achieve success. So business is the main topic that I like to focus on. But yeah, if you could go to my social media pages on Instagram, you'll see I've got, different videos for different topics such as spirituality. I think spirituality is really important. Finance, there's so many different topics that I love to learn about. So that's broad in terms of my Instagram page, but now I'm niching down into business.
Awesome. Perfect. So obviously, podcasting is so popular now. There's around about 250,000 podcasts published every week. What makes your podcast different than those ones?
I don't know. I guess the storytelling makes it unique, and I try to filter out the guests, because I get a lot of people reaching out to me, and yeah, I just want to make sure each episode. I've had episodes where I've interviewed guests and I don't even publish it sometimes. I mean, sorry, previous guests, but it has to be a certain level. And I think the questions have to be really thought-provoking questions. And I think what makes my podcast unique is me, I guess. Every podcast, you're listening to when I listen to podcasts, I listen to that host because I like that host. And so if you connect with me, then you'll listen to my episodes, I guess. I mean, everyone has their unique story and their unique way of doing their podcast. And that's why, you build fans and followers that way, because they're listening to you and the story and your guest as well. But how the energy as well. You definitely have to bring the energy, but hopefully that's why people listen to my podcast.
So that is absolutely perfect. I think that's the best answer. And it took me, and it still, even to this day, takes me a lot to understand that I am on my podcast. Like I mentioned, I have my podcast, a Vietnam podcast. It took me the longest time, and I still struggle with it, that the main point is me. It's weird to be because even for my business, which is 7 Million Bytes Podcasts, if you go to my website, there's pictures of me all over it. And I did not want that in the beginning. And as a business, and you obviously know this as well, being a business person, you have to think of your unique selling point, right? And I cannot think of what really is the unique selling point of my business, because we do podcast editing and podcast consultations. And it's really difficult to be different in that. And eventually I was like, I think I'm the unique selling point, because people want to work with me. Exactly what you said, people like your energy. So it was the last thing you said there, and you could tell you were reluctant to almost say it, but I think it's totally normal, and I'm the same as well. And that is 100% why people will listen to your podcast, because they like you. And something that always sticks with me, so I love stand-up comedy, and I used to do stand-up comedy myself. I've kind of stopped right now. And one of my favorite comedians of all time is Bill Hicks. And one of his pieces of advice was just be yourself, because there's only you can do that. And once you be yourself, you've got the market sewn up, because nobody else can be you. And I do that all the time with the podcast. I'm like, do I need to change this? Should I sound like someone else? I listen to podcasts as well. I'm like, do I need to do this differently? And then I'm like, no, just be you. Like, that takes zero effort to be yourself. Don't try and be someone else. And if people like that, they like that. And if they don't, they don't. So I definitely agree with that. And I think it's great. Yeah, having your guests, definitely. That's really cool that you don't put some episodes out. I've actually never had to do that yet, but it's been close. But that's really good that you vet them that much as well.
Going back on that, because if you want to have a high quality, and I heard Ryan Pineda talk about it on his show too, if you want to have a high quality show and you have guests that are coming on that don't give that energy, or they just pitch too much and don't add value, then it's not going to add value to your listeners. So definitely vet your guests beforehand is something that I highly recommend.
Absolutely perfect. And what is the goal of your podcast for you?
I just want to impact people and share my story, and I just want to build a community as well around people that have the same interests as me, because I'm always learning and I love self-improving. So I just want to find that community and have that network. And the podcast is great because I've built all of the guests that I've had. They're amazing guests that I can connect with and see as friends, because we build a connection. So to be able to do that, and the goal is to have it on a big scale. My dream is to be like Lewis Howes and have 1 million followers on YouTube, because impacting people and doing what you love, because this is what I love. I'm doing it as a passion project for now, but it's an investment into the future. And hopefully I can inspire others as well and share stories that inspire people to make change, a positive change to the world. So yeah, the goal is to just make a huge impact on a scalable level.
Love it. And final question, what lessons or values do you want the listener to come away with at the end of each episode?
It totally depends on each guest. I always leave it up into the guest's hands. And prior to that, I just make sure that I do enough research, and I just let it go as conversational as possible, but have the questions that would help my audience come away with something. And I don't know until the very end of each episode, but as long as the listeners feel that they've learned something that can be used to improve and to succeed in their life, that's the main thing. Because when I'm interviewing guests, I want to make sure that I'm learning and sharing, like the questions that I'm asking. I'm hoping that the listeners find those questions useful as well, just to improve my life and hopefully improve the listener's life. Even if it's just one little piece of advice, one nugget advice, as long as they get something out, one key takeaway out of it, whether that be from finance, spirituality, mindset, health, as long as they take one key lesson, that's all I'm happy with. So, and each guest is unique.
Well, I listened to your latest episode with Jen Patterson, and I definitely took some tips away from that. I thought that was like a really interesting episode. It was, we can talk about the content a bit later, but in terms of content, yeah, it was super helpful. So just going back over some of the questions we talked about there, I mean, I think you already know this. It's amazing that you've recognized this already in terms of niching down. And it's just a common thing that I see with many podcasts, is especially in the similar industry or the similar content that you're doing. They want to do spirituality, business, health, and you've already recognized that becomes too broad. And if you really want to be known for one thing, I would suggest choosing one thing, which it seems like you already have, which is business. But at the end of the day, it's just, that's the advice that people give. It's the advice I give. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the only advice that can work, because, people always ask me, one of the most common questions is, how long should my episodes be? And it really doesn't matter, because the biggest podcast in the world, Joe Rogan, is 3 hours and doesn't really have a niche either. It kind of jumps all over the place and based on the guest. So that's the biggest podcast in the world. I've worked with podcasts that don't have a specific niche and they still get so many downloads. They've massive Patreon followers. And you're like, I remember I was working on one podcast and I was like, everything they do, I would advise the opposite, but they are massive. So they know what they're doing. So it is all just advice, but I would advise definitely niching down. So let's get into your podcast. So I went through, as I said, the last episode. First of all, I absolutely love the hook at the beginning. So this is what we do as well when we are editing podcasts, is we take about 30 seconds of just little clips, little sentences, and put them at the beginning to hook the listener. So I was like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, that's really impressive. It was well made. So was that your idea, or was that your editing team's idea to do this?
No, I just follow who, like, my favorite podcasters and what they do. I'm like, oh, that's good. I'm going to do that. So I wish I'd done that a lot at the beginning, but I've just started to do it. And I think it just gives a teaser of what the podcast is about. You want to hear more. So definitely recommend doing hook if you can.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So obviously I'm mostly listening for audio quality because I'm a podcaster, but I do check the YouTube video because I do make YouTube videos as well. And so I could see that you have, and it's so good for YouTube to have a hook, which I've learned recently as I've been doing more and more YouTube podcasts. If 50% of your viewers are still watching after 30 seconds, that's typical on YouTube. Like, YouTube tells you that information at the bottom if you go into the stats. So that blows me away. But it really shows you do need to grab the listeners or the viewers' attention in that first 30 seconds. So that was absolutely great. The music isn't too loud on top. So some podcasts I've listened to, like, the music can be really loud and it means you can't hear the speakers. So the levels were good. I thought maybe the music could be a tiny bit quieter, but I'm really splitting hairs on that. It was still, you could hear yourself doing the introduction. I did have a question, and maybe if you might not know this answer if you have a team, but was it sped up? Because it seemed really fast.
I wanted to share with you about one of my favorite affiliate partners, and that is Fiverr. I've been using Fiverr for years for everything from ordering YouTube thumbnails to keyword research, writing podcast articles, even to Canva designs and thumbnails and more. So whether you're a budding entrepreneur, a podcaster, or anyone in between, Fiverr has got you covered. It really is the go-to platform if you want to find freelancers offering a massive range of services to help you on any project. Maybe you need a stunning new logo or just a short animation. Whatever you need, you can find it on Fiverr. What I love the most is how easy Fiverr makes it to connect with talented freelancers from around the world, all at prices that will fit whatever your budget is. Plus, with Fiverr's secure payment system, you can trust that your transactions are safe and secure. No dodgy people you meet on Facebook groups that disappear with your money and never give you what you want. What, that's only happened to me? As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you use the link and at no extra cost to you. As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you click my link and you buy something, all at no extra cost to you. And best of all, you will be directly supporting the making of this podcast that you're listening to for free, but it is not free to make. So why wait? Head over to somewhere that you've probably never been before. It's called the show notes. So whatever app you're listening in, if it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything at all, head to the show notes, click on my special link, and then you can browse thousands of gigs ready to help you with your next project.
Which one? The intros or in general?
The intro part and in general at the beginning, it seemed to level out a bit, but in the beginning, I was listening to it and I was like, this just seems really fast. Does she talk this fast or has it been sped up? I wasn't sure.
I don't think so. I generally do talk faster. And when I listen to podcasts, I'm listening to 1.5 speed usually. 1.25 at least. So maybe it's just the way I think. Maybe I should be slowing it down. But I think, when I'm driving, I listen to fast because I haven't got much time. So, and that's probably the way that I talk too, fast.
Maybe then go back and listen to that last one. I actually checked my app to see if I was listening to it sped up. I thought, have I clicked a button and listened to it sped up? And then I looked and it was still 1x speed. And I was like, oh no, it's just really fast. So
is that the intro or is that the intro or the hook?
It was the hook and then the intro as well. Once the intro started, like the first couple of minutes, I was like, this seems really fast. I could imagine if the hook was sped up because you want to get people's attention. But even after the hook, I was like, this is quite fast. So it could be you speaking or your team might have sped it up. So maybe just you can check on that. Also, on the hook, was there like a audio filter over it to make it sound different? Because I think it was like, it was stylistic to maybe change the way it sounded a little bit, but I found it a little bit weird. It was, I don't know how to describe it, and I don't know if you know, but was there like some sort of audio filter over the hook?
I'm not sure, actually. I'll find out because we use, there's a tool in Riverside that's Magic Audio, and I press that for the whole interview. So that should apply for even the hook as well. But I'll find
You
out.
don't know that?
No.
It might be the Magic Audio. But I thought the intro was really good. So it shared exactly what the show was about. We're going to have a deep dive into the minds of entrepreneurs, and it told people exactly what the show did. It said, get ready to be inspired. So it told the listener exactly what they're going to get from it. So I thought the introduction to the show was good, but there was one glaring thing that was missing. You didn't introduce yourself at all. In the beginning of a podcast, you want to introduce obviously who you are, but why are you the person to guide the listener to the goal? So you have a great goal for your podcast that you want people to achieve. You want to make sure that they understand. And like we talked about, you are the selling point. You are why people come back to every episode. You want to make sure you explain why are you the guide. So you obviously have an amazing bio. You can easily tell people, why are you the person to give them business tips? Why are you the person to share this episode? It would be like if I had a DIY podcast, but I've never done DIY in my life. People would be like, why would I listen to this guy? So yeah, I had to go back a couple of times. I was like, oh, you haven't even introduced you don't say your name at all. Never mind, say your credentials. So if you listen to the start of, go back to the beginning of this episode, I just do it very, very briefly. I just say, my name is Niall Mackay. I've had a podcast since 2019. Now I make podcasts all over the world. Very quickly, just explain to people, why should you listen to me and why am I doing this podcast audit? So that would be a big thing. I would do that. And even though it can become repetitive, and I think about this often, and I don't know if it's 100% right, I say a similar thing on every episode, even with my Vietnam podcast. I say, I've lived in Vietnam for 8 years, blah, blah, blah. Tell people why should they listen to me talk about Vietnam as a foreigner, especially. But the way I treat every episode is if somebody's listening for the first time, because we like to think as podcasters, and I used to think this, that everyone is listening to every one of my episodes. They can't wait for a new episode to come out. But in reality, people are finding your podcast and then they're scanning through all the past episodes and they'll be like, oh, there's one I want to hear about. And then they click on that and they listen to it, because your episodes are not like a story, right? You don't need to listen to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can go back and listen to any episode at any time. So I like to think I treat every listener as listening for the first time. We like to think as podcasters, people know who we are, but they might not. And that's why every episode I'll just do a quick introduction. And if you listen to like broadcast radio, which I love as well, they repeat things all the time. My favorite radio show, I've been listening to for 10 years and they still do the same thing every single day. And I still absolutely love it. So I think it's just, I always look to broadcast radio because podcasting and radio is different, but I look at what they do. And like you said as well, try and copy what the best do as well.
Do you know what I like though? But that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was actually thinking of removing the intro and just getting straight from the hook to the guest intro, to cut, like, just so that the retention is higher, because that's what the main the main podcasters do, but they've got their millions of subscribers, so maybe everyone knows them. So what are your thoughts on that? So definitely keep the name part and a little bit of why they should listen. Is that what you're
Yeah. I think you're right about, I look to like the Diary of a CEO and things like this, but he's got on like the biggest guests. Everyone knows who they are, you know what I mean? Everyone knows who he is. But I think if you go back, I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure Diary of a CEO, he will have a very short like introduction of who he is and maybe his past successes. I'm not 100% sure. As I said, it's all just advice, and you could do completely the opposite to what I say and it's still going to be super successful. But this is what I think when I do it. You got a really good introduction of the guest as well. You do exactly what I do as well and what I did for you. You just had a short list of her achievements in almost bullet points, and then you gave her name, which is, so that's the same style that I do, is I will give the bullet points. That's what I did for you of your achievements, and then I give your name. It's just a really nice way of doing an introduction. So that was great as well. You did that. And the guest audio was actually not too bad, because sometimes it's the guest audio which you probably maybe know as well, can be absolutely terrible. They record it on the laptop. I've had guests, or I've been editing a podcast where the guest was outside. So all you could hear was the wind and the noise. And so the guest audio was good. So that was great. But there was some background noise at times. Like, for example, if you go to 3 minutes and 45 seconds, it sounded like someone was talking in the background. I don't know if that was from your side or from her side, but it was a couple of times throughout it. There was some background noise, almost like somebody talking. Yeah, so maybe just check out that. And as I said, I'm not a YouTube expert. I do podcast audios, but I did look at your YouTube video and I do make more and more YouTube videos. My little tip for that would be, make the video more dynamic, because it was just the two of you with a template around it and it didn't change for the 47 minutes or however long it was. How long was the episode? Yeah, 48 minutes. I would try and make it a bit more dynamic. So if you go back and, when this episode comes out, you can check it, or you can look at my previous episodes. I will filter the camera angle through just being on one person, on two people. It might just be on me. We'll move the camera angle. And I don't have a hard rule on this, but every maybe up to 1 or 2 minutes, maybe every 30 seconds, change the angle, because it can be a lot. It's very unlikely that someone's going to sit for 48 minutes and just stare at a video of two people never moving. So that's just a little tip in terms of editing. And in terms of that background noise as well, I would advise wearing headphones. It helps block out all the noise and helps block out all the background noise as well. So that's why I'm wearing headphones as well. What I did notice, and again, audio quality is mostly what I'm looking at, it was quite echoey at times. And now looking at your microphone and hearing your microphone, I'm pretty sure you're using a condenser microphone. That's right, isn't it? The Blue Yeti you're using right now is a condenser microphone. So condenser microphones pick up the whole room. I'm using a dynamic microphone right now, and a dynamic microphone only picks up the sound that's right in front of it. So I actually recorded an episode last week where I had construction going on above me, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my goodness. It started right at the end of the recording. But then when I got to the audio, you actually couldn't hear it, because this microphone is only picking up the sound here, not the sound of the whole room. So it really helps increase the quality of the audio massively. Now, what I do is I use a program called Descript, which has something similar to the Magic Audio. It's called Studio Sound. The problem with using something like the Magic Audio, like you said, you just click it and set it and forget it almost. And AI is incredible, but AI still needs a human touch massively. You could hear throughout the whole episode that Magic Audio was on. I wasn't sure if you were using Studio Sound or not. There was times where it actually made the audio quality almost worse.
Wow.
It doesn't do well with laughter. Studio Sound is similar as well. It kind of makes laughter sound a bit weird, I guess. And so even though you had that Magic Audio on, there was times where it made it sound worse, I thought, to be honest.
Good feedback. I didn't know. Yeah, I'm going to look into getting a dynamic mic as well.
I would 100%. The audio quality will be massive, absolutely massive. But in terms, one of the things I always look out for, right, which you guys didn't do, which was amazing, was talking over each other. That's one of my biggest bugbears, and I advise people on that before I even start recording, which I didn't do with you because you were also a podcast host and I'd heard your episodes. I knew I didn't need to do it with you. But one of the biggest frustrating things for me is when people talk over each other. They don't let the other person finish their thoughts or the sentence, and they already start jumping in and talking. And the other thing that you don't do, which is amazing, and you're not even doing it right now, is when someone's talking and when we have a normal conversation, it's really normal to be like, yep, yeah. And to be honest, it's normally me that does it. I did one of my first episodes, and when I went to edit it, all you could hear was me in the background going like, And I was like, shut up, Neil. You don't do that, which is amazing. And I have to consciously not do it, because I think it really detracts from the quality of the podcast when you have these two competing voices. So throughout the whole episode, I don't think you did it once, which is amazing.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because I'm trying to listen in. So when you have a good listening ear, you got to be mindful of that, making your own noises as well. But I do usually go, wow, like if it's something interesting that they've said, I wait till afterwards and I'm like, wow, that was powerful.
Yeah, I noticed that you waited until they finished talking to react. So that was really great. That was really great. So you definitely you delivered the value that you promised in the beginning of the episode. You told people what they were going to get. Your guest did that. Personally, I loved the content. I thought it was super useful, especially the bit about, she talked about how you pay yourself, which as a business owner myself, that's something I have to think about all the time as well. And there's a guy I follow, Adam Shibley. I don't know if you follow him. He's been on this show. He does the podcasting business school. He talks about that for your podcast to sell yourself, essentially, because that's what he talks about. And that's what I think you should be doing with your podcast. You should be selling your services. He says the content, 70% of it should come from you. Now, obviously, doing an interview episode, it's hard to do 70%. He talks about doing it over the course of your whole podcast. So he says doing solo episodes, because that's obviously 100%. You should balance it out because your listeners, your viewers, they want to come and hear from you. So now I mix it up with solo episodes interview episodes like this. I'll also do solo episodes as well, so that someone comes to my podcast, they know they're getting the knowledge and the expertise from me and not just from the guest. So that would be my biggest tip, was put yourself into it more, not just your guest.
I like that. I'll do that. Yeah.
And your outro was great as well. You told people subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. This is one of the most difficult pieces of advice and one of the most difficult things to do. I would not give the guest a call to action, because I think your podcast, you're spending all the money on it. You've set it all up. Your call to action should be directing people back to whatever you want them to do. So whether it's follow on social media, get in touch with you. I think we've already given the guest the platform to speak. They already know their name. It's in the title. To then have them say, oh, go and tell people where you can follow them and blah, blah, blah. I do that on my Vietnam podcast because I don't make any money from it. It's just a hobby. If you're doing a podcast to support your business, which I think yours is and what it absolutely should be doing, you want to take ownership of that. And it can be really awkward because we invite guests on saying, come and promote yourself or blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you've already given them the platform to speak for 45 minutes. There's probably going to be a link in the show notes, but you don't need to promote that. The one call to action should be what you want people to do, which for you, maybe go to your website or follow on social media. So I would always have just one call to action, and I would make that call to action support your business goals. So it's difficult because we want to promote the guests as well, but I feel like we're already doing that just by having them on. So that would be a big piece of advice. I looked at your show notes as well. You follow almost the exact same template that we do on our show notes for everyone as well. So the show notes were great. Titling was great. You didn't use numbers in your episodes. That's something I always look at as well. If people use numbers when you don't need them, I wouldn't advise on that. So you don't do that. But yeah, overall, it was unbelievable. Great content, really useful. You delivered on what you said. I think in terms of the audio quality, there's definitely a few things that I would improve on in terms of audio quality, because for me, audio quality is the most important thing. I won't listen to a podcast if they don't have good audio quality. And I've absolutely forgot, the biggest piece of feedback that actually, when I was talking about the turning on that magic audio, throughout the whole episode, there was static feedback. And again, I don't know if that's other episodes. I thought it was maybe my headphones, but I listened on 2 different sets of headphones to make sure it wasn't the headphones. There was static noise throughout the whole episode, which I think comes from the magic audio, because when you're using a condenser microphone, it's picking up the whole room. And the magic audio doesn't do the best with that. So studio sound, which is similar to magic audio, works really well with a dynamic microphone. Right now I'm in a big living room. The audio quality should be terrible, but I'm using a dynamic microphone, so it's picking up good sound. And then when I turn on the studio sound, which is same as magic audio, it's going to cut out all that background. But if you use the magic audio on a condenser microphone, or if she was using AirPods, I think when I saw in the video, the magic audio is not the best. Or studio sound as well doesn't do the best. You have to give it the best quality audio in the beginning, and then it will do the rest. So go back and check that out. There's a few things that you could definitely do to improve the audio quality, because the content is great. But as I said, I don't analyze the content because it's not my content, but it was great.
Thank you. I like that. I've written a lot of notes. So very, very useful. I love having feedback to improve.
You are very welcome. So thank you very much for putting your podcast up as well for an audit, because I know it can be scary as well. And some people don't like feedback as well, but No, thank you very much for being a guest, and thank you for sharing your podcast. So, Linda, this has been awesome. Have an amazing day. As I said, my name is Niall Mackay. This is Smarter Podcasting. Please go follow, subscribe, do all of that good things. The best thing that you can do is if you're a podcaster and you like this episode and you found it valuable, please share it with another podcaster. It's one of the best things that you can do. And obviously, you can go to my website, 7millionbikes.com, and you can book a free consultation with me there. And if you have a podcast and you want it to be audited as well, then get in touch with me and I will be more than happy to do that. So thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Smarter Podcasting. Thank you very much, Linda, for being a guest. Have an amazing day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Hi, my name is Sal Jeffries. I run the Mindset, Mood and Movement podcasts. I've been working with Neil at 7 Million Bikes for the whole of this year, literally from the start of my podcast to date. And I want to say a couple of things. So when we record the podcast, sometimes there are things that I need tweaking. There could be edits or clips. It's really simple. I give those instructions to Neil, he gets it sorted. There's sometimes a sound level differences between the guest mic and mine. Again, that's all sorted so the outcome is a really balanced sound. And also if there are issues with voice, little kind of sound interruptions, all those things that can distract a listener, Neil knows exactly what to do, cleans it up. The end result, a highly professional, beautiful sounding podcast without distraction. That's exactly what I want. I know my listeners do. So if you're interested in having that level of podcast and that kind of quality, Neil is a great guy and I highly recommend you speak to him.